The next morning Johnson appeared at the breakfast table in the grandfather's suit he had come in. Shepard pretended not to notice, but one look told him what he already knew, that he was trapped, that there could be nothing now but a battle of nerves, and that Johnson would win it. He wished he had never laid eyes on the boy. The failure of his compassion numbed him. He got out of the house as soon as he could, and all day he dreaded to go home in the evening. He had a faint hope that the boy might be gone when he returned. The grandfather's suit might have meant he was leaving. The hope grew in the afternoon. When he came home and opened the front door, his heart was pounding. He stopped in the hall and looked silently into the living room. His expectant expression faded. His face seemed suddenly as old as his white hair. The two boys were sitting close together on the sofa, reading the same book. Norton's cheek rested against the sleeve of Johnson's black suit. Johnson's finger moved under the lines they were reading. The elder brother and the younger. Shepard looked woodenly at this scene for almost a minute. Then he walked into the room and took off his coat and dropped it on a chair. Neither boy noticed him. He went on to the kitchen. Leola left the supper on the stove every afternoon before she left, and he put it on the table. His head ached and his nerves were taut. He sat down on the kitchen stool and remained there, sunk in his depression. He wondered if he could infuriate Johnson enough to make him leave of his own accord. Last night what had enraged him was the Jesus business. It might enrage Johnson, but it depressed him. Why not simply tell the boy to go, admit defeat? The thought of facing Johnson again sickened him. The boy looked at him as if he were the guilty one, as if he were a moral leper. He knew without conceit that he was a good man, that he had nothing to reproach himself with. His feelings about Johnson now were involuntary. He would like to feel compassion for him. He would like to be able to help him. He longed for the time when there would be no one but himself and Norton in the house, when the child's simple selfishness would be all he had to contend with, and his own loneliness. He got up and took 3 serving dishes off the shelf and took them to the stove. Absently he began pouring the butter beans and the hash into the dishes. When the food was on the table, he called them in. They brought the book with them. Norton pushed his place setting around to the same side of the table as Johnson's, and moved his chair next to Johnson's chair. They sat down and put the book between them. It was a black book with red edges. "What's that you're reading?" Shepard said, sitting down. "The Holy Bible," Johnson said. "God, give me strength," Shepard said under his breath. "We lifted it from a 10-cent store," Johnson said. "We?" Shepard muttered. He turned and glared at Norton. The child's face was bright, and there was an excited sheen to his eyes. The change that had come over the boy struck him for the first time. He looked alert. He had on a blue plaid shirt, and his eyes were a brighter blue than he had ever seen them before. There was a strange new life in him, the sign of new and more rugged vices. "So now you steal," he said, glowering. "You haven't learned to be generous, but you have learned to steal." "No, he ain't," Johnson said. "I was the one lifted it. He only watched. He can't sully himself. It don't make any difference about me. I'm going to hell anyway." Shepard held his tongue. "Unless," Johnson said, "I repent." "Repent, Rufus," Norton said in a pleading voice. "Repent here. You don't want to go to hell." "Stop talking this nonsense," Shepard said, looking sharply at the child. "If I do repent, I'll be a preacher," Johnson said. "If you're going to do it, it's no sense in doing it halfway." "What are you going to be, Norton?" Shepard asked in a brittle voice. "A preacher, too?" There was a glitter of wild pleasure in the child's eyes. "A spaceman!" he shouted. "Wonderful," Shepard said bitterly. Those spaceships ain't going to do you any good unless you believe in Jesus, Johnson said. He wet his finger and began to leaf through the pages of the Bible. I'll read you where it says so, he said. Shepard leaned forward and said, in a low, furious voice, "Put that Bible up, Rufus, and eat your dinner." Johnson continued searching for the passage. "Put that Bible up," Shepard shouted. The boy stopped and looked up. His expression was startled but pleased. "That book is something for you to hide behind," Shepard said. "It's for cowards, people who are afraid to stand on their own feet and figure things out for themselves." Johnson's eyes snapped. He backed his chair a little way from the table. "Satan has you in his power," he said. "Not only me, you too." Shepard reached across the table to grab the book, but Johnson snatched it and put it in his lap. Shepard laughed. "You don't believe in that book, and you know you don't believe in it." "I believe in it," Johnson said. "You don't know what I believe and what I don't." Shepard shook his head. "You don't believe it. You're too intelligent." "I ain't too intelligent," the boy muttered. "You don't know nothing about me. Even if I didn't believe it, it would still be true." "You don't believe it," Shepard said. His face was a taunt. "I believe it," Johnson said breathlessly. "I'll show you I believe it." He opened the book in his lap and tore out a page of it and thrust it into his mouth. He fixed his eyes on Shepard. His jaws worked furiously, and the paper crackled as he chewed it. "Stop this," Shepard said in a dry, burnt-out voice. "Stop it." The boy raised the Bible and tore out a page with his teeth and began grinding it in his mouth, his eyes burning. Shepard reached across the table and knocked the book out of his hand. "Leave the table," he said coldly. Johnson swallowed what was in his mouth. His eyes widened as if a vision of splendor was opening up before him. "I've eaten it," he breathed. "I've eaten it like Ezekiel, and it was honey in my mouth." "Leave this table," Shepard said. His hands were clenched beside his plate. "I've eaten it," the boy cried. Wonder transformed his face. "I've eaten it like Ezekiel, and I don't want none of your food after it, no more ever." "Go then," Shepard said softly. "Go. Go." The boy rose and picked up the Bible and started toward the hall with it. At the door he paused, a small black figure on the threshold of some dark apocalypse. "The devil has you in his power," he said in a jubilant voice, and disappeared.